just raise your hand and let me know, and we'll try to spice it up a bit. And thanks for being here. It's the last session of the conference. So have you guys been here for the whole thing? Has it been a good conference so far? I came in just yesterday, so I haven't been able to attend very much. What's been the best session so far? I'm just kind of curious that we won't go around the room for that, but just if anything sticks out.
I think Aaron Sam's, because I'm an educator, he talked about the flipped classroom and how to use face-to-face time well and deliver content outside of the classroom.
Cool.
Cool. I mean, it's not a new idea, but he was one of the pioneers in developing that kind of
That methodology. Cool.
I think we had one yesterday by Kent Schaefer, which is called Increasing Spiritual Fruit in the Digital World.
Yeah.
He had no PowerPoint, and you just read from the scripture and shared stuff. It was really cool. And he got at this point that I've been thinking about for so long, which is we're so good in the U.S. and in Japan too, in the Christian world of thinking of programs and strategies, and 12-step things, and 12-month plans, and 18-month plans. But he was saying at a certain point we need to step back and just ask God what we need to do. And what God will have us do sometimes is not part of any of our plans, and it may not be the most efficient way, and it may be way outside of what we thought was the best way of doing it. But sometimes that's what we have to do. So that was just really cool to get that perspective.
That's very true. And I'll just state up front, I think analytics is a tool. It's not the end-all and be-all, so I think that's an excellent perspective. So are we all good to go? Great. Well, again, thanks to your flexibility. We're 20 minutes late. I'll try to keep us moving forward here. We've already kind of mentioned, it sounds like everybody is familiar with Google Analytics. Is that who here uses Google Analytics? So a few people. Good, okay. I'm not assuming that you use Google Analytics, and this definitely isn't a tutorial, so I'm not going to show you how to set it up or interpret the stats and stuff like that. What this session is really about are some of the other tools and really some of the trends that are out there that have kind of come alongside what Google Analytics is trying to do and improve upon some of the weaknesses of that tool. So just a little bit about me. You guys were cool about sharing your name. My name is Brian Tol. A lot of people call me Chip because I live in a distributed or work for a distributed company and there was multiple Brians. So if you can imagine, if you're on the phone all the time, it's kind of hard to tell it apart. So if you call me Chip, I'll answer to that too. Those are my beautiful kids, Noah and Annie. Noah's 8 and Annie's 5. I live in Holland, Michigan. This is a beautiful, beautiful spot. If you've never been there, try to visit it in the summer. I took this picture when the ice was still flowing in. I don't recommend winter.
I'm from Lansing.
You're from Lansing?
Yeah.
So you know the pain. Yeah. We had 150 inches of snow this year. So and usually it melts, but I literally had about 4 feet of snow in my front yard. So we've had a wonderful spring. It's even better to be here in California. Before I worked for 5Q, I managed the Bible Gateway. So that's really where I cut my teeth on analytics and lots of data. For the last, I'll say 6 months. I've been doing my job for about 1.5 years now, the current role I'm in. But really, it's the last 6 months we've focused on this idea of analytics, and we've been working on a tool called Mighty Metrics. Promise this isn't a sales pitch. There's some data that we've learned from that I'm going to throw out there. But definitely not a sales pitch. If you want to get in touch with me, this is really kind of a whirlwind trip for me. I came in last night and I got to turn around briefly after noon and get back to LAX to get back to Michigan. Feel free to reach out to me. I'll leave that up there if you want to write that down. Don't feel like you need to take all the notes down. I'll make sure that you guys have the slides and you can view it, but that's how you can get a hold of me here. So today, just kind of the big picture. I want to kind of review, first of all, what makes for a good metric. Someone said there's lots of data. If you go to Google Analytics, there's lots of stuff. Most of that stuff you don't really need to worry about. So we're just going to take a couple minutes to talk about what makes for a valuable and a useful metric. So when you're looking for analytics, those are, I think, two of the key words that you're really wanting to touch on. You don't need everything. You need stuff that you can actually use and actually has value to what you're trying to accomplish. Secondly, we're going to look at some trends in the marketplace, and this is going to, I think, set the context, set the stage for a number of the tools that we're going to look at in the third part, which is we're going to look at 12 relatively new analytics tools. One of them is Google Analytics. The others are things you might have heard of. Maybe you've never heard of them. I don't expect you to use all 12. Really what I want to do is give you the basis for understanding what you might want to measure on your websites, and then maybe there'd be one, maybe two other tools that you might want to use besides Google Analytics to help measure what your organization is trying to accomplish. And then I also list a couple of books as well that you might want to check out. So the first thing I want to talk about is finding really valuable metrics. Quick question, how often do you guys, who here has Google Analytics running? How often do you guys look at your analytics? Once a month? Every day? Weekly? Okay. Good. Here's just a question that I wanted to pose. So if you stopped using your current analytic tools today, would it impact how you make decisions about your website? It's kind of a personal question. It's rhetorical. You don't have to necessarily answer that out loud. But if the answer is no, or maybe you're not even sure, maybe it's time to kind of revisit why are you doing analytics in the first place. If it's just a bunch of raw numbers, but that's nice and it doesn't change at all your strategy, your implementation, how you're trying to do stuff online, maybe you're wasting money. Maybe you can just drop it, right? My hope is that actually you can kind of shift up how you're doing and let analytics be a tool to help you be more effective, save money, reach more people. But this kind of raises a good question of what is analytics anyways, right? And there's a lot of different definitions. My favorite is from a really nice book I've enjoyed called Lean Analytics. It's about startups, but I think there's a lot of application for really anybody doing stuff online. And the authors kind of use this definition, that analytics is the measurement of movement towards your business, and I'll add ministry, nonprofit goals. So it's the measurement of movement. And really there's movement, they say towards, I think sometimes it can also be a helpful tool if you're moving away from your goals. You can step back and go, maybe I'm not doing this right. And I think ultimately, analytics should help you make decisions. It should be a tool that you can look at this and go, am I on track to reach my goals, or am I kind of going away? Sometimes, especially in ministry, we say, we can't measure that, or we can't look at that. I'm not going to talk about it today because it's a really meaty book, but How to Measure Anything by Douglas Hubbard is just a phenomenal book to kind of think through how you can use data to make decisions. He has some really great points about you don't need a lot of data necessarily, but ultimately it should help you make decisions. So first thing I wanted to do here today is kind of maybe give you a way for finding valuable metrics in 4 steps here. This isn't the only way to do it. This is one that we recommend, and we've been kind of developing at 5Q. But the first step is defining your SMART goals. Who here's familiar with the acronym SMART? We'll go through it so it'll make sense in a minute here too. It's a way for defining kind of a realistic goal in a nutshell. So the second step is identifying metrics that actually help you measure towards your goal. Sometimes this is really easy. If you're raising money, for example, you have a goal. It's fairly easy to tell if you're reaching that goal or not, although you'll see in a minute here I have an example for maybe it's not as easy as we sometimes think. Sometimes, especially in ministry, it's like we're really trying to impact people and advance the kingdom, and that's where it gets a little bit more difficult, and that's where you have to be a little bit more creative. But nevertheless, we need to have goals. So the thing with goals is that oftentimes we're kind of tracking a high-level goal. I think it's equally important to identify what I call the impact factors that are influencing your movement. And we'll look at a concrete example to make sense. But basically, it's kind of like you have, let's say you're trying to raise money. We'll walk through this again, but just more times you hear it, maybe it'll stick. There's things you can do on your website to increase your donations, right? If you have 10,000 people visiting your websites, one thing you can do is try to get 1 million people to come to your website, right? And if all the other metrics ratios kind of stay the same, you're going to get more donations. So one of your driving goals, one of your impact factors would be get more people to my website. That's just an example of that. Another one is, can they donate? Does your form work? It's amazing how many people throw up a donation form, or they throw up some content and they just hope it's out there and they don't do any sort of testing on that. And the 4th step kind of mirrors the first, which is identifying metrics that measure your impact factors. So let's walk through real quickly how you might do this. So let's say you want to define your SMART goal, and here's an example, right? A bad way to state this goal would be raise more money. It's kind of abstract, it's not very easy to measure. A smart way to say that would be we want to raise $100,000 in June of this year, and we want to use the web. And that's smart for a couple of reasons. It's specific. We want to raise $100,000. It's measurable. We can measure, did we actually reach $100,000? Is it achievable? If the most your organization has ever raised in July is $50 and some lint, $100,000 is probably not achievable. Oh, I'm one behind here, sorry. Looking at the wrong slide. Is it relevant? If you have grant money and you're doing just fine, raising more money may not be the best effort for you guys. That said, if you need to keep the lights on by raising money, this is probably a relevant goal. And finally, it's time-bound. We're saying we're going to try to do this within a specific period of time, 1 month in this case. So that's where the acronym SMART comes from. There's books on this, there's Wikipedia articles on that. I don't need to spend more time there. But I think it's really important if you have goals to make them SMART goals and write them down. Otherwise, you really are going to have a hard time improving anything online. So the second step is identifying metrics that measure your goal. Well, simple, right? It's donations. So if I said we're at $45,900, yay, right? We're halfway almost to our goal. Is that good or bad? Well, a lot of things kind of determine there. So we definitely want to track the overall number, but it can be helpful to start to graph this. So if I told you we're halfway through the month, we've raised half the money, well, that still sounds pretty good, right? We're about on track. We're halfway through the month, and we can graph it here. And we kind of see we have a dip here, but it kind of rebounded. So are we doing good? Can anybody just look at this and know if we're on track? Maybe. How about if I show you this one? Now it starts to become a little clearer, right? We raised $27,500 in the first week. We only raised $16,400 in the second one, and we're down 40% week over week. So we're probably not averaging very good. And if we can even add a couple other things here too, we can see, okay, well, in week 2 and 3 to reach our goal, we got to be back up where we were the first week. So this is an example of, I think, a good metric. This helps you understand where you are in terms of going. It's not just measuring the raw number, it's measuring your movement week over week. And this is just an example. If you're looking at it over a year, maybe a week isn't the right way to do it. Maybe it's a month or a quarter. But this, I think, gives you the feel for, okay, where am I at and are we actually making sense? So there's lots of, I mean, if you read these books, there's probably 20 different definitions of what a good metric is. I just picked a few. One is, I think it's good if you understand what it means. I think part of the problem with Google Analytics is you go in there and you don't really know, is it good or bad and different? Am I doing something right? Am I doing something bad? You see these lines go up and down and all over the place. So not the most understandable. This comes out of Lean Analytics, that book too, the second one, which is your metric should include a ratio or a rate. So back to that last slide there. We didn't just say 27 and 6, we actually included the down 40%. That kind of helps us visualize that difference a little better. The other thing that I mentioned on the next slide, which is you can compare it, right? We can compare these two things against the future progress, and we know how we're doing. So these are the type of analytics that you might want to put together. Just don't, so the takeaway here is don't just use the stuff that's coming out of Google Analytics or all these other tools. You might have to do a little bit more legwork to make sense of it. But it doesn't really take that long, and it helps you make decisions much better. So don't be afraid to maybe open up Excel or some other tool and start to think through your goals a little bit better. So understandable, rate and ratio, and it's comparable. So the next step is to identify the impact factors that influence your goal, which in this case is we want to raise $100,000. So if we go back to this slide, what the problem here is we don't really know what caused the drop week over week, right? We see our progress, we're moving towards it slowly and we're kind of losing momentum, but it's not really apparent why we're losing momentum. So just an analogy there for you visual thinkers. It's kind of like measuring your speed versus what's causing your speed, right? So if you're a Formula One racer, and I'm not a gearhead, I just completely made this up and found this on the internet, but if you're driving a Formula One car, if you're on this team, you're measuring all the stuff and more, right? There's sensors on all these different parts of the car sending it back to some computer and it's graphing all those things. And that means something to all those people, right? And they can start to see, okay, this oil temperature is up, maybe that's causing some problems here and there, and they're starting to see this big picture of what's causing them to go faster or to go slower, and they can tweak all those little things to get that much more speed out of the car. Does that all kind of make sense? So that makes sense, but I definitely would not recommend starting with that many metrics, right? When they first started writing cars, if you look at this last one here, they're measuring the exhaust gas temperature in each branch. My guess is that's not the first thing they started to measure when they started to try to tweak their strategy for getting the car faster. So I'm going to give you just a few examples here of how you can kind of decompose this problem of tracking our goal into 4 kind of impact factors. And I actually got this from a guy named Guy Richards. He presented at CLA a couple months ago, and I thought this was really great. And this actually, I think this pattern works for a lot of different things on the web.
Can I ask what CLA is?
Sure. Yeah, it's the Christian Leadership Association Conference.
Okay.
It's this big, overpriced conference where all the Christian leaders, if you have a lot of money, come and learn stuff.
Okay.
So we'll walk through these. So the number of people who visit your website, right? If you can get that number to go up, you're probably going to see your donations go up, assuming that they're the right people, which is a big if. So the second impact metric there, factor, is the number of people who visit your donation form, right? If you get 1 million people come to your website, but you don't get proportionally the same number of people visiting your donation form, you're probably not going to see an uptick. So you also want to focus on getting more of those people to visit the forum and then get more of those people to donate. And then you can also focus on trying to nudge them towards a larger average donation size, right? If you're at $10, if you can get that average donation size up to 50 or 100, you're going to see a big uptick towards your goal of raising $100,000. So again, that's a donation example. We might not all have donations. But again, if you can kind of decompose your goal, that's the big takeaway here, into some of these things that you can start to directly change on the website, you're starting to get there. So after you've kind of decomposed your goal into these impact factors, then you can start to actually put metrics to them. And these are just some easy ones that you can pull out of Google Analytics. Unique visitors by channel. So did I have people come in through Facebook or through search or direct or email, or do I have some other website referring me a lot of traffic? You can start to tweak those things. So if you have maybe a low number of people coming in through search engine optimization, right? People aren't finding you in Google. Well, maybe there's an opportunity there to do the stuff that Georgia talked about the last session and start to do some SEO. Again, you start tracking how many people are actually visiting my form, how many people are getting to my thank you page. It's an easy way to measure if they completed the page. And then independently, you can track what's the average donation size. And really, for a lot of things on the web, this pattern works really, really well. So if you need to, you got a mailing list, you want to increase that, or you have great content that maybe will solve a problem and is going to reduce your help desk, get more people to read that content, you can start to think about how do I achieve that goal. Just an important note here, if you want to do these things, you definitely want to do them all cohesively and you want to look at the broader context. Just for example, if you wanted to, let's say, take your average donation size from $10 and get up to $100, I can do that in 10 minutes. You simply don't allow people to give you donations smaller than $100. I guarantee you that will increase your average donation size, but what's going to happen then? Exactly. So that's a really kind of a contrived example, but this is where all these things, these levers kind of work together. And if you put your foot down on one of them, it might make the other one kind of go out of whack. So you definitely want to think through how these things all work. So I'm going to stop there. Any questions about that section? That's kind of about valuable and useful metrics. Does this make sense? Was it helpful? Was it too much? Anything didn't make sense? Yes, sir.
Are these separate numbers, or how do you tell who moved from one page to another page?
That's a really good question. It depends on, we'll look at some tools where you can actually do that. Say, I want to look at this group of users. If you're just using Google Analytics, you just kind of want to pick a period of time and just look at the numbers, and it'll tell you what's the unique count for my entire website, what's the unique visitor count for this page, and that's all you need.
Tell you how many people
If that's important to you, if you say, I want to somehow have a landing page and I want to see how many people from this landing page went to the forum, those are two other numbers, and you can look that up in Google Analytics. Yep. And you can look at the traffic between those two. Yep, that's a good question. Any other questions or thoughts? Cool. All right, some market trends. These are some things that you'll kind of see some patterns in some of these other tools that I talked about. So I wanted to talk about this, so when I walk through some of these websites, you'll kind of have a framework to kind of plug them in and go, oh yeah, Chartbeat is really focused on attention, or Mixpanel is really focused on action. So that's why I wanted to walk through this a little bit. And just a little bit about this, there's really kind of two broad categories of metrics that we could care about. One is metrics about technology and infrastructure. And if you're a geek like us, you care about, what's the load on my web server? Is it going up or down? Is it, be able to serve things efficiently? Is my bandwidth latency low so that the page is getting there quickly? Those are kind of geeky data. We're not going to talk about that. What we're going to really focus on are people analytics. And in general, I found anytime you talk to a marketer or a development person, they want more, anything you can give them about people, they just love. No one laughed at my everybody knows the movie at least, right? Okay, good. Okay. So this really raises a basic question of who is the audience for your website? This isn't one we really think about. Oftentimes we look at Google Analytics and it says you've had 50,000 people come to your website or 5,000 people come to your website. And we say, oh, that's my audience, right? Maybe, probably not. I think you'll see that's not the case as we walk through this. And really, a big theme you'll see from all these tools is helping you understand who your audience is better. So again, another working definition. This comes from the CEO of one of the tools we're going to look at, Chartbeat. And he says, an audience is someone who knows who you are, likes what you do, and they come back. We're going to modify this a little bit, but yeah, if you guys want to write that down, I think it's a really great perspective. It's someone who knows who you are, they like what you do, and they come back. So how do we measure how do we measure the audience? Well, one way is measuring how much attention over a period of time your audience has given you, right? I'm just going to skip ahead here for time. So let's look at two examples here. We had user A and user B. They came to your website. The first one came to your homepage. They visited your first article, they visited your second article, and they visited your third article. That's one type of user. The second user just visited one article. They found it in Google search or something like that, or they found it in social media and they came to your website. Which user is more valuable? Which one gave you more attention? All right, let me add a little bit more context here. Looking at which one is more valuable. Which one gave you more attention? Exactly. So it's not just the number of page views. Page views are almost like a raw stat. When Google Analytics first came out, it was a really helpful tool. But as we've gotten to know it a little better, page views are kind of helpful, but we want to get some more data to go along with the page views to understand what's going on.
So a question. How can it tell if somebody comes and spends 3 minutes on Article 2 and then goes off to Amazon to buy a book?
That's a very good question. There's two ways. The first way, the historical way that Google Analytics does it, is it measures the time between the page views. So if you come to a web page and it loads up, Google Analytics goes, oh, so-and-so came to this web page at noon. Then they went to Article 1 at 12:04. So we're just going to say this person, the time on that home page was 4 minutes. That's how we've historically done it. As the web has gotten more complex and we have these tab browser environments and all these windows, people load stuff up, what we're finding is that's not a very accurate metric. So what a number of these tools are doing is they actually keep track of how much time you've actively been on a web page. So for example, what our product does is we'll say, okay, you came in at a page view at noon, and we kind of look at it. Are you scrolling? Are you looking at the page? Are you doing stuff? And we'll say, oh, yep, he's still here after 10 seconds. We're going to send another bit of data back to the collection service. We start to build this picture. And over here, well, and then maybe you went and you got some coffee. right? You got a phone call, you stopped doing something on the page, and you came back at 12:03 and you spent another 10 seconds on the web page. Okay, we're going to send that data back. So the actual activity, the actual attention that you've gotten is 20 seconds, not the 4 minutes that Google Analytics is reporting. And this is where a number of the tools we'll look at will give you this type of data, so you can shape it a little bit.
Now, what kind of methods are they using to determine that you were active for that 10 seconds?
Most of them, what they're doing is they're using JavaScript hooking into the gut of the web page. It's called the DOM, the Document Object Model. If any geeks in here familiar? There's one at least, two. So what it's basically doing is watching for the stuff that are you clicking the mouse? Are you scrolling? Scrolling's the big one. You can tell a lot by someone scrolling through an article, or you can hook into, are they watching the video? Same type of thing. That's usually how it happens. I know with us there's about 12 different things that could happen in the browser that we're watching for, and that's kind of how we do it. And that's how very similar all the other tools do it too.
And I don't know if you were going to cover this or not, but on mobile, can you use the same set of things to watch to see if they're active or not, or is it?
Mobile web is true, yeah. Some tools, like there's a couple we'll look at, actually have SDKs or software that you can mix into your app to do this. It's a little different, but it does the same type of thing. So if someone clicks a button in your app or they scroll, those types of data points can also be collected and shipped back.
And then what about mobile formatted sites, not just apps?
This will work, any of the JavaScript tools will work for mobile too, yeah, except on really old browsers, so really old phones. But really, if you look at the stats, people don't really surf. I mean, iOS is still the dominant device there.
Netscape will work on Netscape.
Yeah. What's Mosaic? Yeah. So just a kind of and this is some of the data that we've gotten out of Mighty Metrics. And it's so far been kind of true, so I don't mind sharing it. I don't know as we continue to get more customers and more data points if this will remain true. But right now, this is roughly the pattern that we've seen. So if you have the number 100,000 visitors in Google Analytics, right? Let's say that you have some website and you've done really well if you got 100,000 people, in my opinion. What we've seen is, well, basically only 50,000 have read a page. They've only spent 30 seconds or more on any given page. So right there, about half your audience, half your visitors aren't really giving you a lot of attention. And this is over like 90 days, right? This isn't just a single visit. This is, they haven't period giving you that much attention. And then about 3%, if you're doing well, have given you 5 minutes and 5 or more visits too. And that's kind of an arbitrary metric depending on what you're trying to do, but just for us to be able to compare websites, we've come up with this 5 and 5 rule. So over 90 days, did they give you 5 total minutes of attention, and have they come back 5 or more times? We're finding it's about 3% to 0.5% of the audience. So really, or the visitors. So if you see this big number in Google Analytics, that's not your audience. That's just the total number of people that happen to walk by your store and do a little window shopping and then turn around and leave. So just a ballpark figure. Now, we're not the only ones who are using attention as a way to do metrics. A lot of media companies are using different terms, but they roughly mean the same thing. Upworthy and YouTube use this concept of attention minutes. So they're not really tracking the number of page views or even the number of times you click play. They're actually tracking how long are individuals watching, consuming, reading material. Medium, which is a new website that the guys that created Twitter started up a couple years ago, they look at total reading time, total time reading, TTRs is their metric. I think we'll start to see more and more, as the tools get better, we're going to start to see more websites track time and attention. And I just saw in one of the blogs I follow that there's a publisher starting to sell advertising, not by the number of page views, but by the total amount of time that the audience spends on the website. So if you spend 5 minutes on a website and there's ads on that, they're going to get more money. So I think this is a really great move, because I think it's going to move us towards better quality content. Because if there's better content, you're probably going to spend more time reading it, right? Now, of course, there's ways to game the system. If you put like a little game on the side of a web page and it's like kind of an addicting little game, you know, you're kind of inflating your time on site numbers. Completely different way to kind of track of attention, but it can be very helpful, is heat maps. Anybody ever do anything with heat maps? Heat maps work, well, you install a little bit of JavaScript and it keeps track of where you click. And there's a lot of really strong research that shows where you click is where your eyes are going. So as you move the mouse around, that's your mouse is a proxy for where your attention is. So this is a way, so the darker the color, that's where more people are looking. So as you can see, the bright red there is where most of the people that were coming to this version of the Guardian site were spending their focus on a page. So this isn't tracking time, this is just tracking a different way to slice and dice the attention, but it can be really helpful for understanding design flaws on your website.
Question, do these
Yes.
tools use cookies to track the flow of the user's interactions, such as they go from this page to this page to this page, or are you using something else that can know what the user is?
Most of them are using cookies. That said, there's a lot of research about browser fingerprinting, which is, especially in desktop browsers, the way that your browser is configured, the plugins, the version of your operating system, all that stuff, can give us a really accurate identifier for the uniqueness of who you are. So even if you delete your cookies, if we have your browser fingerprint, you're using the same browser, we can still track you. So that said, there's a movement, I'm glad you bring that up, in terms of privacy, there's an initiative called Do Not Track, and a number of the browser makers are starting to build that in. So if you go into the settings and say, don't track me, there's a little bit of data that goes along with every request you send for a web page. So when you type in google.com, there's some data that gets sent to Google that says, this is the web page I want. And if you are enabling Do Not Track, you include a little bit of data that says, oh yeah, by the way, Google, don't track me. And they won't track you. Now, as I say that, Google actually doesn't respect that yet, because it's Google and they want more data about you. But it's interesting, the newest version of the Apple products that just came out this week, they just announced the newest Mac 10 and iOS 8 and stuff like that. The default incognito mode search engine is DuckDuckGo, which who here has heard of DuckDuckGo? A couple people. It's a very small, relatively speaking, search engine, just like Google, just like Yahoo. Has a bunch of cool features, but by default, it does not track you like Google does. So Apple is shifting over, so we're going to see huge numbers coming to DuckDuckGo.
Except for people like me who want the search engine to track me, so it's
Oh, sure.
results
Yep.
that are relevant to me, not
Yep.
the general population.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's, and rightly so, I think Google has found value in that. I think with the current situation of the NSA and everything else, I think people are hesitant to have all their data tracked. So we're going to start to see, I think, more control given over to the user. So it's a very, very good point. In the future, not all these tools are going to be accurate. And really, I didn't put a slide in here too, but you know, there's, what do they say about stats? There's stats, you know, lies, damn lies, and stats. Analytics is the same way. I guarantee you install 10 different analytics tools on your website, every single one is going to give you a slightly different number for the total number of people that visited it. Guarantee it. I'll put a $100 bet on it right now. Unless it's a really small website. Zero, exactly. No one visited it. But there's so many variables on, you know, you load up a page, well, the JavaScript didn't load, or, you know, it didn't get the data back to the service, and there's all these reasons it might not work. But anyways, that was the first trend, is measuring attention. The second one is measuring the actions a user takes on a page and across the site. And here's what I mean by that. In Google Analytics, basically what you're tracking by default are pages, right? You put the little code on there and you say, oh, this person visited the home page, or they visited my FAQ page, or they visited my contact form. What a lot of these tools are doing, and in fact, you can do some of this with Google Analytics, is starting to say, you know, I really don't care about the individual pages. I want to care about the actions that people were taking while they were on a page, right? Or I want to track the intent of what that page meant. If I'm publishing content, I want to know about the content. So in a way, attention is kind of an action, but I don't need to get into that. But so what you'll see a trend here is like, okay, I don't really want to track the individual page. I want to track if they downloaded a file from that page, or if they played an audio file on that page, or if they filled out the form on that page, or they registered for the site, or they logged in, or they did all this other stuff. Then what we can do is you'll see a lot of tools in terms of cohort analysis and funnel analysis, and I'll give you some concrete examples of what those two things are. But it starts to help you understand, with cohort analysis, are my visitors coming back? Am I converting my visitors into my audience, and am I deepening the relationship with my audience? And then with funnel analysis, you can start to debug like a checkout process or some sort of flow, right? I had 100,000 people register for my site, I had 10,000 log in, and I had 5,000 actually do an action. They downloaded or they played something. So funnel analysis is a really helpful tool for that. So that's the second trend, converting raw page views into actions and then starting to make sense of it. The last one is, we kind of touched about it just a minute ago, but the identity and tracking users across websites. And this was one of the big changes that Google Analytics did in the last, well, they've been doing it in beta now for over a year, but there's Google Analytics Classic and there's Google Analytics Universal. And there's a number of features that Universal provides. But the big one is when someone comes to your web page, if you know who they are, if they're logged in some way or you just have some other way that they've self-identified, you can send that information along to Google and they will start to correlate that. So, you know, if they know who you are and you visit a website on the desktop and you visit on your tablet and your cell phone, and I don't know, in a couple of years you'll be on your refrigerator or in your car, or you know, you'll have your little Google Glass or something like that. If that identifier stays with you, they can correlate all that data back to that single user. So they know that Ian visited here, 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 and here. So he doesn't look like in 4 different users or 5 different users or 7 different users. It's all back to that single person. And this is something that a lot of the other tools do too. So Google Analytics is kind of playing catch up here. And then beyond that too, actually identify a name with that data. So when you go into the tool, you can actually start to see, this is what Ian did, not just random person A. And a lot of organizations are starting to use that, and they're correlating it back with their customer database and saying, oh, here are some trends. Ian was looking at, I don't know you well enough, what's a hobby?
I don't know. YouTube.
YouTube? YouTube's a hobby, okay. He's watched a lot of videos about cats. So let's market cat stuff to him. You love cats, like everybody else on the internet, right? You want your web page views to go up, put a cute cat on your web page. So all those trends, but it comes back to, again, our working definition here. An audience is someone who knows who you are, likes what you do, and comes back and takes the actions you care about. And ideally, you know them by name. It's not just some random person out there. You're starting to put identity to this data and using that in some of your other initiatives. Okay, and now for the most complex slide of the deck. And I'll explain this all, but this kind of ties it all together. And this is another book I highly recommend. It's called Clout, The Art and Science of Influential Web Content. It's not a heavy read. It's a pretty thin book. If you're going to start with one and you're doing content on the website, I'd pick up Clout. It's like $15 on Kindle or $10 even. But this actually is a graph that they use, and it makes the point, if you want to have a result, if there's an outcome that you're aiming for, and you want someone to do that, there's 2 things that you need, really. You need them to have the right attitude, and you need them to be able to take the action and actually take the action. And then they decompose that further, and they say, well, what's attitude? Well, it's really 4 things. It's an awareness, it's a likability, it's trust, and they're motivated. So, does that all kind of make sense? I can talk through that further, but hopefully the concepts make sense. So once they have the right attitude, they're ready to undertake the action. There's 3 things. They need to have, again, the motivation to do it, the ability to do it, right? If you want them to donate, but you don't give them a tool to donate to you or connect with you in some way, I really want to give you money, I can't do it, right? You're not there yet. And they also need a call to action. They need a trigger of, okay, why do we need to donate today? Why do I need to sign up for this email list today? Why should I read this piece of content today? All those things kind of go together. And in general, it's not a great thing because attitude and attention aren't really one-to-one, but we can use attention as a proxy and say, okay, if you're giving me more attention, there's more awareness. Hopefully you like my content. I'm starting to build trust with you. Trust takes time. It's not just something that happens overnight. And you're starting to position the motivation. And then you can introduce the ability and the action and have that be successful. So I'll leave that up for a minute. I think a couple people are writing it down. And again, that'll be in the slide deck. But that's why people in general are starting to track attention and actions and not just raw page views and visitors and all these things. So this is also going back to setting goals. This can be a useful filter for setting goals, right? What result do I want to take? That's just goal, result, just different words, same thing. So I'll stop there. We're going to spend probably take us 20 minutes to go through the tools and some books. Any questions about the last section? Good, it's either making sense or I'm putting you all to sleep.
What does trust mean? I mean, and what it means in this context. How do you tell somebody to trust your content?
I think that comes down to, well, trust your content. I would answer that in a couple different ways. Trust is, I think if no one knows you, here's a good simple example. You remember like GeoCities?
Yes.
So if I go to a website and it looks like GeoCities, or if I go to a website that looks like the New York Times, which one am I just going to trust if I don't know anything about those two organizations?
New York Times.
Yeah. So that's why design in general can be a helpful thing. Social proof is another thing that can help that, right? If you have other testimonials on your website, even if they don't necessarily know who that is, that's social proof, and that can help to start build trust. What's the first thing that you do when you go to an Amazon webpage about a book? You read the reviews, right? That's why they do that. They're building trust about the product. Because the reality is they could have faked all those, right? They could have a million monkeys in the back, right? Or some really smart algorithm spitting out these reviews. But you trust Amazon, and therefore you trust the reviews. And they've spent 2 decades now building that trust and moving that over to the product. Yep. And it's important too, trust and likability are two different things. I might trust somebody, but I might not like them. So you want to find an audience, you really want to cultivate an audience that has all those things. They're aware of who you are, they like you, and they trust you. Those are kind of the big three.
So the book that you mentioned give like more information on how you make yourself likable and trustable?
It does, yeah. It basically, this is the first and second chapter, I think, and then they have data on examples of how to do all this stuff. Yep. I forget too, they give credit to the guy that came up with this, and he has a website. He's some PhD who's done a lot of, and he's got grids and examples and just a whole bunch of other more research on understanding how this all kind of works together. Cool. Well, let's dive into some of the tools. Now that you know what makes for a good metric and what are some of the trends that you might see. And when you evaluate tools, I mean, there's really lots of different ways to do it. So I kind of biased the review here with the stuff we just went through. So visitors, audience, attention, and action. So I tried to, at a high level, explain these tools based on those 4 criteria. So first one, of course, we'll start with Google Analytics. And I'm not anti-Google Analytics. I don't want to come across that way. It's free, it's good, it has good stuff. I just think the raw reports are meaningless because Google doesn't know what your goals are. Google doesn't know what your results are going to be. So it's just going to give you this raw data. But it's a good place to start. So Google Analytics, if we kind of go through it here, really good at helping you just understand your visitors. If you just want to know how many people walked by your store and maybe came inside and looked around a little bit, it's really good. I don't think, and this is probably the biggest problem I have with Google Analytics, it doesn't help you understand your audience. It doesn't help you say, here are the people that are really passionate about what you're doing. The best it does is it kind of has a couple of graphs that show like new versus returning users, and it kind of does a distribution of how they're returning, but it doesn't do anything beyond that. Doesn't really help us with attention. Again, it uses that old school, for lack of a better term, of saying this is how we're measuring people between page views. So the time on page and the time on site is not as helpful. The other thing that it kind of skews, that I've seen working with Mighty Metrics, is the bounce rate. A bounce, everybody know what a bounce is? They come to your one page and then they leave. They bounced. What I've seen looking at, kind of drilling down into it, some of your most engaged people are going to have lots of bounces. Why? Well, they bookmarked you, they're coming to your homepage, they're checking you out, there's nothing new, they're going to leave. So bounces in and of themselves isn't a very good metric for understanding your audience. It helps you understand your visitors, right? Well, these people are coming, but they're not coming back. Well, you need to understand both. Are they coming and they're coming back every single day and maybe multiple times a day and you just don't have anything new for them?
Google.com has a huge bounce rate.
Yeah,
But that's what it's,
it's supposed to, right? Well, hopefully well, now what is the bounce rate, right? It's really, with Ajax and all these other technologies, page views are kind of going away. But you're right. Their whole point of Google.com is to get you someplace else as quickly as possible. I do think Google Analytics is good for some high-level goals. You can like set up conversion rates and some of that kind of stuff. That's a great place to start. If you don't have any actions that you're tracking on your web page, start there, spend some time learning that. That's an area you can kind of just drill down into and take an hour and learn it and implement it in another hour, and you have some really valuable stuff. So that's the first tool. Just a couple other notes here. If you haven't already, upgrade to Google Universal. There's some really nice features, even if you're not going to do the identifier. I forget, I should have put that in the slide. There were three major components they upgraded. Tracking individuals is helpful. One thing I was disappointed in is you can add this identifier, but you can't actually do anything. It correlates the data better, but doesn't give you better reports. So I would say if you're going to go through the effort of identifying people, use some of these other tools we're going to go through. So another tool here is Mixpanel, mixpanel.com. They have a free version, and then like a lot of these tools, the price point starts to get pricey. It's $150 a month up to $2,000 or $3,000 a month if you've got a lot of data. It's pretty much, all these tools are based on the volume of data that you're pushing into it. That said, I wouldn't just discount it because of the price. There's a lot of things you can do here because Mixpanel works just like Google Analytics. You add a little bit of JavaScript, but then you take an additional step and you say, this is an action that somebody took. So let's say we're going back to our blog, and we get a blog, and we have a homepage, and we have all our individual articles. What you would do in Mixpanel is you would set up Google Analytics, you'd set up the JavaScript, and then on all your article pages, you would add a little bit more JavaScript that says this is an article page. So when someone comes to this page, I'm going to track it as they read an article, versus if they use my search engine or they visit my FAQ or my contact page. And you can start to track just article reads versus page views in general. And if you don't care about it, I think it's free up to like 25,000 actions a month. So you can still get a lot of data. And I think that for action-based stuff, Mixpanel is probably one of the best tools here. It does do anonymous and identified people. And like a lot of these tools, you can actually you can convert an anonymous user to an identified user. And what I mean by that is, let's say you have somebody and they've been coming to your website. They started 6 months ago. You don't know anything about them. They come back 4 months later, 2 months ago, a month, a week ago, and then they finally signed up for your newsletter. They finally logged in or registered. Mixpanel and all these other tools can go, oh, hey, great. Now I have a name that I can associate with all that back data. And you can start to build a profile for that person and see where they came from and see what they're interested in and start to understand your users that way. So it's not trivial to set up. I use JavaScript. It's not a lot of JavaScript. They walk you through it real easily. So don't be afraid of that. And it has extremely powerful funnel and cohort charts. And I'm going to take a minute here and just walk through what I mean by both those things, because that's a common tool set that you'll see across the board. So a funnel chart is, Google Analytics has this at a high level too, is basically looking at the number of people that started here and end up over here. So in this case, we're going to say we had, about 600 or 790 people come to the home page. We had 70% of those go to the search rooms page in this example. And then from there, 61% of those people actually booked a hotel room. These are some of these impact factors that, like, if you run a hotel website, you might care about, right? We want people to come to our website. We want them to search for a room. We ultimately want them to book it. That's how we're going to make our money. So our goal is a revenue goal. This is how we decompose it into the things that we can measure and control for and actually improve upon. The second thing, and it's a funky looking report. Every time I look at it, there's different ways to view it, but they all kind of look like this. This is a cohort report. So typically what you're doing is you're grouping people together based on some criteria. Usually a lot of these charts are, when's the first time this person visited your website. So that would be a cohort. And then you start to graph their progress over the months. So over here, we're looking at what's the first week we saw these people. So we're going to group all the people we first saw on December 10, so we had 5,900. All the people we first saw on December 17, 4,700. And then we're going to start to track them over a period of time. And that's what the x-axis is here, or excuse me, that's right, the x-axis. So the first week, the second week, the third week. So this is why you kind of see this step chart over here. A lot of data, basically what it's letting you do is say, okay, am I improving over time? Is the group from November 19, we have the most, or I'll pick December 3 here, are they still around? Are they still coming to my website? Are they still doing stuff I care about? And is that any better for the other groups? So that allows you to make changes to your website and start to track that over time. Probably seems convoluted. Like I said, every time I look at this stuff, there's actually a whole bunch of blog articles on how to make better cohort charts, because these things are so hard to read. But if you spend some time and actually dig into it, they can be very helpful.
So does that use cookies to track people?
It does, yeah.
So to the extent that a user...
Well, Mixpanel actually is the tool that will do web and native. It'll do, you add a little software to your thing, and you can get charts like this for your native apps too.
Yeah, because you mentioned on the previous slide, it does support native mobile. So you can do the same kind of information for that also.
Exactly, yep. And
how accurate is this stuff? I mean, we know that, like, it says, like, you know, from November 26 after 12 weeks, it's 7.82. Is that, like, really accurate, or does the way they measure things mean that there's a certain margin of error in that?
I think there's always a margin of error with analytics, but I think it's accurate in terms of the data they have. So if you assume plus or minus some data didn't actually get to them, it's good enough. But again, we're trying to make decisions. So I think for making decisions, whether it was 2.36 or 2.26, not going to make that big of an impact in how I'm making a decision for a lot of these things. If we're talking 0.2% on $1 billion, that's a big deal, right? We might want to spend some more time there. But for most websites, the size of your audience is good enough. You're not going to worry about it too much. So Mixpanel is one tool. Kissmetrics.com is another one. This one is free, again, for a certain level of data, and then it jumps up to 150, and then it goes up to like $500. So again, these aren't things that you might necessarily just jump into. But what I like about Mixpanel and Kissmetrics are kind of almost direct competitors. They do some very similar things. One of the things I like about Kissmetrics that I'm not as big a fan in with Mixpanel is with Kiss you can make all these different little banners. So you can set up these goals and your impact factor metrics and kind of see them all in a single view. Mixpanel doesn't have quite the same thing. And you can also drill down and look at individual people. Mixpanel does that too, but I think the view here is slightly better. Both these things price it by the JavaScript events or the native app events that you're pushing into it. So you can control how much data goes into it. Just to kind of explain that a little better, you can imagine like if you run a music website like Spotify or RDO or something like that, you might, every time someone plays a song, you might have an event that gets triggered. I played a song, you played a song, all that data goes back. If you only care about maybe a single event on 2 or 3 parts of your web page, you can just limit it to that section and you only pay for that data. So again, I don't want you to just, $500, I don't have that much money. Well, there's some things you can do with just a little bit of your website. And again, if you've picked your goals and you know what really matters to you, just measure that stuff and don't worry about the rest of your website. So again, tracks visitors well and does anonymous and identified people. Doesn't do attention. And yeah, I think it's one of the best options right now for tracking actions. Again, it's not trivial to set up. You got to go through and add all the JavaScript and stuff like that. It does do native, and it does have, again, powerful cohort and funnel charts.
And most of the ones that do native mobile, are they native on both iOS and Android?
Yes, they have software that'll work on all of them. Yep, and this one, is it Heap? I'd have to double check my notes. A couple of these have them for different programming languages too. So If you got PHP, you can send data in on the back end too. It's not just JavaScript, which can be helpful. Heap analytics is a lot like Mixpanel and Kissmetrics. The big difference is instead of having to you go in and add the JavaScript for every single event that you care about, Heap says, I don't care, I'm just going to take it all. Literally, every single event in the DOM that happens, you click on a thing, you copy and paste, well, not copy and paste necessarily, but if you scroll, if you do all these things, all that data gets sent back to Heap automatically. And then later you go into their interface and you say, all right, click on that CSS identifier. I'm going to say that's an action I care about. So you can go in later and identify all this stuff. So it's kind of just all you can eat, and then you can go back in later and change it. Now, that's really useful because you can just start tracking it and worry later about the events that you care about. But their pricing models, as you can imagine, slightly different. Instead of paying by the event, because they just take it all in. I mean, there's thousands of events that are going to come in. They price it by the visit. So you're going to pay by the number of visits that you have coming to your website. Again, they do have a free version. Might be a good option if you have a smaller website and price isn't an option. So, yep, you kind of see a trend here. Heap, Mixpanel, and Kiss are all kind of the same. They'll track visitors, really focused on anonymous and identified people. Don't do a whole lot with attention and a whole lot of stuff with actions.
And no native mobile support for that.
That might be changing. I don't know, to be honest with you. I'd have to check that out. I don't remember. They started with the web. I think a lot of these, like Mixpanel, started with mobile and then moved to the web. I think Heap might be on the web and moving to mobile. So I think they'll definitely be a player if they're not already. So here's one, Chartbeat, and they have really two audiences. One is their kind of low-level $9.95 an option for everybody, and then they're really geared towards large journalistic operations. They work with The Guardian, New York Times. I mean, people with lots of data. What they're really focused on is helping publishers and editors make real-time decisions about what's happening on the website. So they show you how many people are there, where they're coming from, but more importantly, what articles are getting traction from what different places. So maybe they posted an article and Google is starting to send a whole bunch of traffic to that page. It's like, oh, well, maybe we want to do more advertising on that page, or maybe we'll change that page real time. Because news, of course, is very real time, right? I mean, the journalists around here can tell me differently, but I think a lot of traction is if there's a hot news story, you're probably going to get more attention on that news story in that period of time. That might not be your bread and butter, that it's a really good editorial that people come back to over time, but this helps you modify that page in real time. Now, the downside is real time for most of us isn't really helpful. It's not like I'm going to be sitting there watching the 3 people coming to my personal blog necessarily. So there's some downsides there, and that's honestly part of the reason we kind of developed Mighty Metrics. But again, for $10, you can try it out, see how it goes. Again, does visitors, it's really kind of focused on anonymous users. It's not going to help you understand if people are coming back. All the attention data is great, but it's real time, and it's really not focused on actions, right? It's focused on, are people reading my content? Side note here, I didn't put that up here. They have a great blog. They've done a really good job kind of publishing what they're learning. So if you just want to check them out for their blog, especially the journalists in the room, I think you can learn a lot from their blog. Mighty Metrics, this is the one that we've been developing at 5Q. I'm a good Dutchman. I don't like advertising myself, so I'll just let you check it out for yourself. But we are focused on visitors. We do have anonymous and identified users, and we're really focused on attention. We work in the media, the ministry web page. There's a lot of content that ministries are publishing. So what we do is we look at attention and then we categorize it. So we say if it's less than 10 seconds on a web page, we call it a blink. If it's between 10 and 30 seconds, we call it a scan. And if it's over 30 seconds, we call it a read. So we help you understand, are people reading stuff? What are they reading? Which pages are getting more attention versus drive-by users and things like that. And we're working on actions, but it's not there yet. And it's still in beta. So if you want to sign up, I'll give you a deal on our trial accounts if you want to try it out, and I'd love to get your feedback. I'm going to move through a couple of these other ones real quickly. I'm just looking at the time. Clicky is probably the best priced option for a lot of this stuff. If you just want to, I don't think the interface is anything to write home with, and I think it's kind of clunky. It's definitely not as smooth and as user-friendly as Mixed Panel.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
For the one that you guys are working on, Biometrics, did you guys say you're native on mobile?
No, we're not.
Okay. Do
No.
you plan to do that, or you're not going to go into that area?
Lord willing, if we're successful, we'll definitely look at native, but that's not on our radar right now. We got a lot of other fish to fry.
So you're not native on mobile, but you support, you're on JavaScript, so you can support mobile formatted.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, Clicky is a really good tool here, just to kind of get your feet wet if you're kind of curious. Again, it does real time, but I think for the price point, it starts at $9 a month, and I think their highest level is like $79 or something like that. So much cheaper than $150 or $500 a month. They track visitors. They do anonymous and identified people. Their attention reports are a little bit limited. They use the same methodology that Mighty Metrics and Chartbeat use, but the reports aren't as good. But it does do, it's one of those few tools I think that does attention and does actions. So if you're interested in those things, I think for the price point, it's really good. Intercom is a tool. It's really focused on tracking the actions that individuals do, but it has a really great feature. If you've signed, if you have their email address, so this is where you have registered users or something like that, you know who the user is, you can actually email them directly from their app. So you can say, show me everybody who created an account but hasn't logged in the last 90 days. And then you can send an email to all those people. So it's really great for communicating with people, which is why I wanted to include it here. So visitors, yes. Mostly identified people. They don't do a whole lot with anonymous. Limited attention, and they do definitely track.
And is there identifying only by email, or can they use cookies also?
Well, cookies how they track them, but you have to have some identifier that goes along with that. So just because I have a cookie, I don't know what your name is. I have to have you register or sign up or do something else to get your email address. So it's primarily, it's heavily used by people that have like online web apps that require a login, but I wanted to include it. The next two I have not used, but I've had good recommendations. I think you say it Woopra. It's free, and this one goes up to $79 as well. Very similar feature set with, well, the user side is very similar to Mixed Panel, I think, and Kissmetrics, which is kind of nice. Just to Go Squared is another one. This is also real time. And again, it does actions, not attention. So instead of looking at, like, where Chartbeat would be looking at how much time are you spending looking at the articles, they're looking at how many people are actively doing stuff, the actions that I care about on my webpage. So we're shifting gears here now. I apologize, this is where our problems initially are kind of going to make us run short. So shifting gears here, these are two different types of tools again. So let's say that you've got your goal, you have your impact factor, and you know that you need to make a tweak on one web page, right? Maybe you have two different versions of a form and your team is arguing, and I think it needs to be blue. No, I think it needs to be yellow or red or whatever. A/B testing is a methodology for giving the user multiple versions and then kind of looking at what your users end up using more, which one likes, So let's say you have a blue homepage and you want to see if blue impacts the number of donations you have. So what you do is you show half the audience the blue and the other half your other option. It's variations go up from there, but that's the simplest example. You have two different versions, and then you just track over time which one generates more conversions. And donations is just one example. You could do which color increases people to read more or sign up more or something like that. So A/B testing frameworks, Optimizely is a great tool. It starts at $17 a month. So if you have some decisions and you're not quite sure and you got some options, just spend $17 a month and you can probably get some answers. Mathematically, I will say this requires to have a certain level of users before there's a confidence in that data. Mathematician?
30.
30?
Yeah.
Is it 30?
Well, I mean, that's if you're just doing it simple.
Yeah, I think, and a lot of these tools will give you, yeah, the more the merrier. And these tools, the good ones will help you say, I've had enough data, I can give you a 95% confidence. So it's not just, I ran it for 30 hours, I had 3 visitors, blew 1. Well, it's not statistically significant. So that's the thing you want to check out with. And we kind of talked about this in general, but I didn't talk about the tool. Crazy Egg is probably the best one. Again, it's pretty easy to install, $9 a month and up. And then just a couple of books here. And once you know what you need to do, a lot of this comes down to usability. Design and usability, right? It's amazing the assumptions that we make about our websites because we use it every day. We know what we meant. That's not the case with your end user. They don't know what you meant. They don't do it every day. So they might come to a form or they might come to a web page and go, I'm confused. I don't know what's going on here. So Don't Make Me Think is a great book about simple things you can test about web usability. And the newest version, you want to look for the red book. There's like 3 or 4 different editions. If you're interested in mobile, get that one. Great book, easy to read. Definitely recommend checking it out. And finally, probably the Bible, if you want to call it that, Web Analytics 2.0 is a good book on analytics. I won't say it's great because it's getting a little dated. None of the tools I mentioned other than Google Analytics is listed in this book. So my hope is the author's going to update it with a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about here. But if you haven't really read up on analytics in general, this talks about a lot of other stuff we didn't have a chance to talk about today. Voice of the user, qualitative and quantitative feedback and statistics and stuff like that. So we'll end here. Just wanted to come back to this because I think this is a practical thing you can do today. Again, it's those 4 steps. Define your SMART goals, identify the metrics that matter to you, identify the impact factors that you can go through that influence are you achieving your goal, identify the metrics that help you understand that, and then finally, just set a goal. Maybe you just spend an hour a week looking at stats and not just looking at the raw data that Google Analytics gives you, but taking it out, building your own framework, your own charts in Excel or whatever to help you understand what you're trying to do. That process will help you better your website in and of itself. It'll force you to sit down and go, what do I actually care about? And how do I make a difference there? Maybe an hour is too much, maybe 30 minutes a week or something like that, but I think going through that process is going to be helpful. And that's it. So thank you very much for your time, especially at the end of the conference here, last one. You did great, so appreciate it. Yeah, we got 5 minutes here. Like I said, I need to jet for the airport in a little bit, but any questions?
I have one. It's pretty common to make like a web landing page for a mobile app. So people will search maybe on Google and they'll come to your page and they'll have two big buttons, one that says download for iOS and one that says download for Android. Is there any kind of analytics you can use to track what percentage of people that come to your page actually end up downloading the app on iTunes or Google?
Yes, there is actually. Let me grab this. With a number of these tools, again, you can use JavaScript to track the action. So if this is your web page, I sure hope that's not permanent. Good. Who would put, every once in a while you see somebody put a, all right, so here's your question, right? You got 2 buttons. What you can do is say, okay, when someone clicks that button, I'm going to send the event back to the collection service. Or when someone clicks the Google Play button, I can't draw, this is an Apple, right? Or Play, Google. That can send a button back there. And what happens is you get the statistics about which button was clicked.
But then you don't know if they actually ended up downloading the app or not, though. Is there a way to find that out?
Some of the SDKs you can.
Yeah, like what? Like what kind of stuff?
Well, your question is, if I have someone come in and they click this and go here,
Yes.
if you know who they are here and you know who they are in the app, you can make that correlation.
But otherwise,
You're stuck, right?
yeah.
Yeah, you should be getting stats in Google Play and Apple. What you don't know is,
Matching up the users.
yeah,
Seeing if there's a user of the app that was the same user that came to this page, you know that they downloaded it.
right.
And so,
But that's definitely where like having like a Facebook login or something like that can help you out. So if you have your site, sign up for this Facebook login, go to the App Store, install it, then you have your Facebook login there, then you can
Yeah.
make that connection and say, okay, this person just downloaded this and they just installed it.
Good question. Yeah. Yes, sir.
All the JavaScript stuff that you have to put on your pages, how, is that heavy? I mean, is there a lot of,
Not necessarily. No, it's usually the core of it is just like Google Analytics, where there's some JavaScript you just kind of copy and paste, and then the JavaScript is they make it simple. Usually it's like a line of code to send an event back to them, so that part isn't tricky. The tricky part is attaching that to the right thing. So if someone clicks on a button here, you have to add a listener to the button and then send the code out. And that's the part they don't necessarily help you with. So again, that's not a lot of code, but that's not, you have to do a little bit of research or have a techie friend or somebody help you with that. Great. Well, good. Thank you very much for your time. Have a great rest of your day.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.